Thanks for joining us during the 6-hour Webathon, broadcasting live from Jerusalem, focusing on raising temple consciousness by exploring the biblical, historical, contemporary, and political issues surrounding the Temple Mount, the holiest site in the world.
Coming up next, Yisrael Medad, Director of Educational Programming and Information Resources at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center. Yisrael Medad, a veteran Temple Mount activist, will be discussing the role of the media in depicting Temple Mount activism and the struggle to achieve Jewish freedom of worship on the Temple Mount, as guaranteed by Israeli law. Affectionately known as Winky, Yisrael is a well-known columnist for the Jerusalem Post and the author of the popular blog My Right Word. You are watching the 3rd Annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day program. I know that you're having as much fun as we are, maybe even more. Why? Because you're sitting back at your computers. You get to chat with each other in our virtual chat room. You get to call our 800 number and make donations, and you get to be the viewer benefit recipient of all of our hard work. But there's something very exciting about being on a live Webathon set. People are running around, getting very excited. Phones are ringing. Great things are happening. I want to thank everyone who's donated so far. Your names should start appearing on our video crawl soon. And of course, we do want to remember to thank the Shraga Family of America for their generous donation that's basically underwriting this wonderful program. So we're here with somebody, I dare not speak his name, but his name is Winky. No, that's not really his name, but that's what Rabbi Richman affectionately calls him. And I had permission to say that. So please don't think I'm being disrespectful, but I'm here to introduce Yisrael Medad, who is a veteran. And when I say veteran, I'm talking from way back, veteran, Temple Mount activist. He is a media personality. He's a columnist for the Jerusalem Post, a blogger. He has a wonderful blog called My Right Word, as in R-I-G-H-T, but you know, it's a play on words of right word. And he's also the Director of Resources at the Menachem Begin Center. And he's here to talk to us today about the Temple Mount. And I just want to say also, he was here with us last year on our maiden voyage into video, audio, broadcasting, and see, he even came back. So you know that he must not be too upset with our product last year.
It's a pleasure.
So happy to have you here. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you're a media guy.
Well, I've always tried to be connected with getting the word out, and my first appearance as a spokesperson was back in 1966 when we had a demonstration outside the Waldorf Astoria Hotel on the transfer of Hawk missiles to Saudi Arabia. So I had my picture in the newspaper, and you know, when you're that young and you get a little bit of coverage, it sort of bites you.
Right.
So I've been on and off a long, long time.
So Yisrael, you are our media expert tonight. So there's a phenomenon that has been going on for a long time. It's very consistent. It's very predictable. For some reason, the media, local media, international, electronic, print, whenever there's a case of civil rights, of the little guy against the big guy, of people getting tread upon, the media always congregates around the David against the Goliath, and backs it up and provides positive media attention to whether it's civil rights in the United States back in the 60s, whether it was the struggle to free the Soviet Jews, whether it was apartheid in Africa, whatever the cause is. You can always count on the media to be there to support the cause, with one exception, and that is the struggle for rights, Jewish rights, to pray, to worship on the Temple Mount, where at best the media is apathetic, and at worst the media treats us like
ugly red-headed stepchildren.
Exactly. Thank you, Lorelai. What can you explain that phenomenon? Where is it coming from? What can we do about it?
Well, I think we have to analyze it, and I'll try to do it very quickly and thoroughly. The media over the past 30 years has made a change. I think they used to call it new journalism, which meant you inserted the reporter or the person writing into the story. It was a new age type of journalism in which looking at the story through his eyes with him present in the story. Once that was done, 50% of the time you're going to get a slanted story. The 5 W's of standard journalism practice went out the window. Objective journalism was seen as old-fashioned.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, over the past 30 years or more, issues such as the Temple Mount are viewed by younger and younger journalists coming into the scene who are brought up on a liberal arts education, on a very secular type of approach to life. And this story simply is outside their frame. And it's very difficult for them, even if they wanted to understand it, because they don't listen to the words, they don't understand the concepts, and they view it as a problem. Once you view it as a problem, for them, for their approach to peace, for their approach to multiculturalism, for their approach, it breaks down. Add that to the fact that Israel's governments, ever since 1967, starting with the meeting of Moshe Dayan on the Temple Mount with the heads of the Waqf, and going on with Menachem Begin later on, saying that he doesn't want this issue to be a religious war, when it is a religious war, but he doesn't want it to be that way. Once the government portrays it as something they don't want, they will not pass the law. The law that was passed, they will not fulfill. The Supreme Court says it's a very special, unique case. We don't want to get involved. So you put these two things together, they dovetail very well. Unfortunately, as you explained, that there's a very negative media approach, and that's the filter we're trying to overcome in that part of the struggle.
So part of the problem you're saying is the mixed message that Israel projects to the world, that yes, we have some people who say we want our rights fulfilled. Those rights are written in law and in common sense, democratic common sense. Yet we have governments and establishments that do everything they can to discourage, which I guess you could say about any civil rights movement by definition is up against a system that it's struggling to change.
Well, yes, I'll give you an example of the problem. Okay, over the past year, the state comptroller had issued a report about what is going on. And this report is secret. Okay, so you would think, especially among, shall we call them left-wingers, liberals, progressives, as soon as they smell a government clamping down on information, withholding information, you would think that would set them off into a frenzy, into a news frenzy. But it doesn't happen. They'll report it. I'm not saying it's completely censored, but they will not, as you would like to indicate, they're not going on a campaign, a press campaign, and looking for people to interview every 10 days, to send TV crews out to find out what's going on archaeologically or architecturally or scientifically or things like that. They will not say, well, look what the Taliban did to those Buddha statues in Afghanistan or other issues, or they won't say, look at Spain. Spain doesn't allow Muslims to pray at the Cordova Mosque, which used to be a mosque and now a church. That is okay, but if we sort of raise the issue of shared space for prayer, and in fact, ours is the only religion that says our house shall be a house for all peoples. You can't get more multicultural, more liberal, more progressive than that within the Jewish halachic framework, and still that doesn't satisfy their interest in order to pass on the information to the people who are the media consumers.
Why is the state comptroller's report a secret?
Because usually, I'm going to guess, I haven't seen it, I haven't spoken to any members of the Knesset, but the indications that I've seen is very simply very negative in terms of the police. Okay, the police have lists of who can and who cannot go up.
Yes, we know.
Now, if I cannot go up, I should have the possibility of turning to the court and say, you know, like habeas corpus, you know, bring me the proof. Okay, fine. If I've been planting bombs up there for the past 5 years, I can understand them not letting me up there. If I'm not, if I haven't even raised a ruckus, if I haven't made a confrontation, if I haven't been swaying back and forth so that a Waqf official could claim that I'm praying or communing, why should I have to go through any sort of process? At the media, I do something wrong, fine. So immediately, anybody who appears Jewish, if he wears a skull cap, if he has his fringes outside of his pants, if he's carrying a Hebrew book, or even in some cases, if he's wearing non-leather shoes, or he's even going up only in his socks, immediately he will be checked, and even in most cases, he will even be prevented, and we can't fight this because the police don't even give us, and I was at one of the Knesset committee sessions, they wouldn't give us their regulations for stopping people or for registering people or whatever. And that's really not very good in terms of democracy.
We're talking about the Israeli police now, right?
Yes, we are.
We're not talking about the Muslim-controlled police. We're talking about the Israeli police that have control over the Temple Mount. There's a special contingent of police within the regular Israeli police force that are deployed on the Temple Mount, is that
well,
right?
usually it's mainly Druze because of their Arabic faculties, okay?
Right.
But it doesn't mean all the time. It depends on the situation. I don't want to say that everything is bad, okay? Just recently, for example, we've had several groups of soldiers, IDF soldiers in uniform, ascend to the Temple Mount.
I've seen them.
And for those who have looked at some of the Arabic language sites, it's driven them batty. You also have to understand that we already have an arrangement down in Hebron, in the Cave of the Patriarchs, which works fairly well. Some days of the year, only Jews can come in. I think it's 10 times. Sometimes in an equal number of days, only Muslims. The rest of the time, the day is divided. The same situation exists basically on the Temple Mount in terms of time division. A Jew can go up between 7:30 and 10:30, and then from 11:30 to 12:30, etc. Now it might be changing after another change of daylight savings, but you can't do anything Jewish up there.
Right.
Not even in a loud voice, not in a dancing, any sort of element that would be identified other than a tourist, other than a non-Muslim. The Waqf officials, as you say, will raise the alarm, they'll get very excited, they'll call the police will act, and if not, every once in a while, as we saw about a month and a half ago, they'll throw stones.
Right.
At which point the police then prevent Jews from going up because there's a threat of violence. It's like the Keystone Cops.
And the media will then portray the story as Jews being provocative, upsetting the status quo, unnecessarily being religiously fanatic, without looking at the situation that the fanaticism is on the part of the people who not only are stoning Jews, not only are stoning Christian visitors who are up there, as we know, but also then take advantage and throw stones over the wall onto the Western Wall Plaza down below. People who wouldn't, as we know, some people don't go up there. They're also getting stoned for no reason, and that, though, is framed in
Jewish provocation.
Jewish provocation.
You mentioned the report of the comptroller, which is, I think it was comptroller's report, that is being withheld secretive. The ZOA, Zionist Organization of America, recently released a very in-depth report describing the situation of non-Muslims, Jews and Christians who want to go up to the Temple Mount to pray, especially if non-Jews are with a Jewish guide. Then they are treated exactly as the Jews are treated. And they explained in detail the discrimination against the Jews and other non-Muslims. This was recently reported in the Haaretz newspaper, which I think Haaretz used to be called, maybe it still is, the thinking man's paper. It's a very old, established Israeli paper.
For those who think.
Right, for those who think, once. Anyway, they took this report, and basically they weren't even relating to the Temple Mount. They're relating to, just wanted to bash the ZOA. But I'm just going to quote a few lines from it. What do you call a non-for-profit organization that denounces Israel for its policies in Jerusalem's holiest shrine, voicing outrage that the devout endure humiliation, discrimination, draconian bars to religious expression, oppressive denial of access to holy sites, physical mistreatment, and forced arrests and beatings at the hands of Israeli police? I'm not even sure that's really a sentence. What do you call a group that at the time of extreme tension in the most incendiary locations in the old city supports fundamentalist radicals, that's me and you,
Apparently.
in a push to overturn a precarious balance between faiths, a move that could set off massive violence and cause untold damage to Israel. Answer in every case, the Zionist Organization of America. I don't want to talk about the ZOA now, and this may be an extreme example of journalism, how they treat the Temple Mount. But what do we do with something like this? How do we combat something like this?
Well, of course, you could always publish articles and point out that parallel issues within Islam, such as honor killings, such as stonings, such as beheadings, or all sorts of other issues, should be equally treated. I mean, if you're against the religious fanaticism, all right, do it all around. Or look at the roots of the situation. Are you true? In other words, instead of, as you say, misleading the public by using superlatives, hyperbole, other type of sensationalist language, just simply say, this is their letter, and you think something else is different, and give the ZOA a chance to answer and say what the situation is. If that doesn't work, you don't buy the paper. If that doesn't work, there are other organizations that deal with media criticism that you can support. But I mean, the joke used to be, if we really wanted a free press, right, own it.
Right.
That's the only way you're going to get what you want.
but Haaretz publishes in English, and so therefore it is read abroad. And my understanding is that much of the diplomatic corps abroad, and even governments, I mean, the United States government officials, see Haaretz as one of their sources of what's going on in Israel. So this very distorted version of what's happening here is being sent around the world. And you know how it is. You can write an article, you can write a response, they can even publish a correction. But, you know, the story's already passed. You mentioned something earlier, which I thought was very interesting, in talking about the new journalism, whereby a reporter is inserted into a situation. What about inserting reporters into our situation as Jews who are being discriminated against? Do you think there's a possibility, something to be gained by that?
Well, it could be gained, but don't forget that the other revolution that has happened, and it might not have the same elitist type of a status that a newspaper like Haaretz has, or the New York Times, it's true, but the internet has democratized, actually, mass communication. And you would not believe the amount of people that are getting information from websites, from bloggers, from tweeters, or
Facebook.
Twitterers. Not quite sure the terms like that. It's not as powerful. And what happens, though, and I will decry this as a media, even though I am a media critic, what's happening is people are choosing their media outlets. Instead of saying, I can trust all the newspapers I read basically to give me the facts and proper perspectives, what's happening is that, you know, if for those in America, they know Fox is say, we shall say, conservative, and NBC or NMC is on the left. So that divides society. So instead of media fulfilling the job and its own responsibility of making sure that there's a democratic discussion in society so that next time you vote, you're an engaged, informed citizen so you can make a proper decision, it's contributing to the polarization of society, which is not very good. And polarization also means it happens on a roll. The more you do it, the more you like it. And so it's not enough, you know, to be a religious fanatic. You're a provocateur. If not a provocateur, you're a destroyer of peace. And all sorts of other elements that are involved in the Temple Mount. So the first lesson I think we should all agree upon here is that anybody who's interested in the Temple Mount, anybody who's interested in Jewish rights in the Temple Mount, please try to get as much information before you draw your own opinions on the situation if you're not yet influenced by anything else you've been brought up with. I think it's one of the messages that we can send out to those who are listening to us, who will be watching us, and maybe even reading about things that we have said here. So I think that's a very good point to bring up.
The mainstream media, we were talking about the quote-unquote new journalism, which is actually the old journalism. It used to be, as you said, what, where, who, when, why, and how. And inserting a personality or a point of view in was called editorial or a feature story, where like I'm taking a trip and this is the story of my cruise. In a straight news story, it was only supposed to be the facts, and the journalist himself or herself was supposed to be invisible. That's classic journalism, which obviously is dead and doesn't exist anymore. And you talked about the reporters being basically of a younger demographic, and they're raised in a secular way, and they have this liberal arts education. But what about the editors? It's like the reporters are the people who are writing the stories, but the editors and the managing editors and the corporate conglomerates that actually own most of the major media outlets in this world, they clearly have a point of view that they're looking to be expressed. We're not just talking about some young 25-year-old pup who has just been reading his local newspaper and writing a little story. We're talking about a much bigger agenda.
A fellow by the name of Goldberg, I think it's Benjamin, or I'm not quite sure, wrote a book about his experiences with CBS, if I'm not mistaken. And the issue there that he came up with was that these people assume that everybody is liberal. And they don't even view it as a bias or as a slant. And they presume anybody outside their world is wrong. Right. So in other words, the short answer would be, as soon as you reach the level of editor or desk responsibility, the guy who sends out the reporters into the field, then you really begin to be biased, because then you really insert, then you say how many people are on the panel, who was on the panel in television. In the newspaper, it's the same situation. How many column inches, what type of picture do you put in the newspaper? That's really comes to play.
It's all very manipulative. So fascinating subject. We're going to be right back after this brief and interesting thing that's going to happen on your screen in one moment. More with Yisrael Medad. We're talking about the media and how it affects your perception of what's going on the Temple Mount. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back, and you're still watching us. This is the 3rd annual International Temple Mount Awareness Day program. We're here live with veteran media activist, veteran Temple Mount activist, Yisrael Medad, and my co-host here, Yitzchak Reuven, the multimedia director of the Temple Institute. And Yisrael, what makes you a veteran? You don't look that old. You don't look old enough to be a vet. What makes you senior here?
Well, I made Aliyah in 1970 and was immediately mobilized into the Temple Mount campaign by a fellow by the name of, now he's Dr. Menachem Ben Yashar. And I could say that I've been accosted by police. I've been thrown off the Temple Mount. I've even had my hand photographed on television as the gate shut, slamming on it several times before I, in pain, withdrew it. And so in those early days, it was a lot more, I think, rambunctious to a certain extent. But I especially, I think, like one particular incident, which I'm very proud of. And that was a one-time deal when we managed to get 10 people together for a minyan, and we prayed the afternoon, the mincha prayer, totally unimpeded. There was one Waqf God that sort of tried to break us up, and we have a picture of it. I hope maybe you're viewing it. I tried to identify everybody who's there. Okay. So you can see Gershon Solomon and Rav Moshe Feiglin and a few other people like that. So that was over 40 years ago. Wow. I've been involved ever since in many forms and like that. And I guess the older you get, the more veteran you get.
And you still go up regularly? And
I still go up, not as regularly as I'd like to, but I go up every once in a while. I take up special groups. I was asked to take members of Knesset up because of my knowledge and because I'm not just a religious devotee of the situation. But historically speaking, I mean, people really, for example, don't know that some of the underground chambers up on the Temple Mount that exist were used by the Mufti's henchmen in the 1930s as rifle shooting ranges. Little things like that, or historical periods of the Byzantine or like that. So I try to give an all-around general liberal arts tour of the Temple Mount because it is very fascinating, very interesting. And it also puts the Temple Mount on earth. I mean, there's too many people, I think, get too excited about the situation And as I think we mentioned in the first segment of our talk, there are archaeological and scientific and other political issues which have nothing to do with a faith or a passion of belief about the Temple Mount, which is very important. I think it's a true and genuine. But there are other things to be dealt with as well.
Yisrael, I understand that the religious issue of Jewish prayer in the Temple Mount is a little more complex maybe than what your average journalist can absorb. But the issue of the archaeology and the destruction that the Waqf is committing by unrestricted digging against Israeli law, with the government turning a blind eye, just destroying priceless, precious artifacts of our most holy site. How can it be that journalists don't get that? How can it be that this isn't a religious issue, although archaeologists are very passionate about it, but this has to do with our heritage and has to do with respecting multiculturalism, let's say, respecting other people's culture, their past. Why aren't they on board with this? Why don't they scream to high heaven to get the government to step in and put an end to it?
Well, one item is, and maybe we can see some pictures that I tried to pick up, if you look at the Temple Mount over the last century or century and a half, you can see, I don't want to say naked, but no development up there, almost ruins, nothing really developed. And it's only because after '67 and our attempts to assert our rights on an equal status that you have construction of open-air prayer platforms, planting trees, repaving, all sorts of things. And then they built these 2 new mosques starting in the 1990s, stuff like that. And this parallels the same issue that we have with the state of Israel in terms of, or Jerusalem as a whole. It's only when we want it that we begin to express ourselves, that we begin to take active steps towards preparing ourselves for that period, even without dealing with construction of a temple, or but getting ready for it, as a great Jewish sage, the Chaim spoke about. He used a very nice example, if I may use it. He said, why does a bride dress up as pretty as possible for her wedding day? It's to arouse and to attract her husband. Love is spiritual and love is physical. He said, as when we learn the laws of the temple service, we learn these aspects of it, we're like preparing ourselves, we're dressing ourselves to ask God beautiful to come close to us. We're ready, come to us already. So the situation of Shekhinah and Knesset Yisrael, the community of Israel, is something that's very powerful, and it could be developed in various levels. People in the media, even politicians, these things turn them off because for them, they're not logical. For them, they have no purpose. For them, they don't deal with how can I get elected in the next elections, or how can I get my name in the newspaper or my face on the television in a larger or more often times. And so in this situation, it's a very difficult problem for those who are honest and sincere and do not mean harm, or to take, at least in this stage of life, in this stage of development or process of redemption, to offend anybody. We want what you have. You have the right to prayer, we have the right to prayer. Put us in some corner outside the sacred precincts is fine enough, but give us a standing up there. We have no standing. It's also psychological. The Jewish people for too many years saw the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall as used to be called sometimes, as a substitute. In that situation, we only have sometimes ourselves to blame.
Absolutely. So we're really caught between a rock and a hard spot, because if we, God forbid, ignore the Temple Mount, then, well, we're not interested, so let the Muslims have it. If we pay too much attention to it, then A, we're troublemakers, we're fanatics, and B, we're encouraging them, the Muslims, to continue to develop the Temple Mount, to build mosques, and to undermine the Jewish artifacts of the temple that are there. So, Yisrael, you have to give us something we can work with here. Give us some
well,
hope,
I could say two things. First, three things. First of all, you pursue and you continue and you try your utmost. I personally have tried to broaden my approach. I deal with legal issues. I write letters to newspapers based on the law. Historical, archaeological. I do not, use it only, as we say in our type of lingo, only Beit Midrash type of talk, only talk of a Talmudical academy or a learning situation. Right. And I avoid groups that only talk about the temple. You have to talk about everything because a Jew is also about everything. And the second point is basically to show commitment in terms of continuing, because we have made tremendous advances. I'm veteran, okay? The situation has changed dramatically. Even we came back after a dangerous period of almost 3 years of no Jew being allowed to go up at all. Okay, so we have to look on the good side. We also, as we say, we have to bless also the good that we get. We're not people who are too sarcastic or too cynical. I hope we are anyway in that situation. And the last point is to know that you're right. To convince yourself that even though you may be looked at askance or odd, you are not. They are the people who are wrong. Treat them with respect. Treat them assertively. Fight back if you have a legal case or anything else like that. But deal with people as they are and try to overcome all these things, because the Temple Mount, and I also make an appeal to everybody who's listening to us, the Temple Mount will be the place where all the nations of the world will return and come to, as we know, according to the prophecies. So in this situation, we can't afford not to deal with it. We cannot say we can turn this off. This is not something that is not to be used.
Let me ask you a question. Why do you think that there's almost no interest in the Temple Mount as one of Israel's historical sites? You know how the government says this is an official historical site. The Temple Mount isn't even listed. It's not.
Politicians are people, and people have foibles, and people have issues.
Yeah.
And so when they have to fight, for example, for Shiloh to be a heritage site, or the tomb of Rachel, or the cave of the patriarchs, and you see UNESCO getting involved and the Palestinian Authority getting involved, the United States not saying anything. The last time something like this happened, I must point out, was President Clinton, Bill Clinton, when Arafat at Camp David II told him that the Jewish temple was not on the Temple Mount. He said, "Sir, you're wrong. Even I know it was." And then Ehud Barak said, when Jesus was overturning the tables of the moneylenders, he wasn't in a mosque. He was in a temple. So we do have friends, and we do have alliances to be built, and we do have a good side to do. You just have to keep it up. It's very difficult sometimes. But the joke goes, the fellow who was demonstrating with a sign by himself, and someone came over and said, "You're not doing anything. You're not affecting everybody. You're not changing anything." He said, "I'm demonstrating first and foremost so the world doesn't change me. Once I am not changed, then we begin to move on to changing other people. That's why I'm demonstrating. That's why I'm voicing my opinion. That's why I'm writing my articles. That's why everybody here, I think, is trying to make people aware there's a problem. And if we've got a message through, it'll be understood, and then action follows."
So everybody, each and every one of us, should see themselves as that lone protester who is, if for nothing else, is making sure that that he's not going to be changed, he's not going to be swayed.
And looking for partners.
And looking for partners.
For example, I just see a new book is coming out by Nadav Shragai this week. So there'll be more material in English to learn about. There are many websites. The Temple Institute is a wealth of information. People should read. Try to convince themselves. If they have questions, they can probably get in touch with almost anybody on this program. Email today is very easy, and we'll try to deal with the situation in our own media variations of blogging or direct contact. And I think being aware of what the Temple Mount is, being aware what the temple will be, and its potency, its message for all peoples, then I think we can build coalitions that will help us in our campaign.
Well, that is very, very encouraging, very optimistic. The message that we're getting throughout the night is persistence and patience and perseverance, and just keep up the good work. Everybody who's watching and all of us here, just don't stop. Yes, you know, yesterday you were one person, today you may be 3 people, tomorrow you may be 300, but we're forming a community that's all over the world, and together we are and can continue to affect change and really get there, change the situation, build the Mikdash, and do it with the support of all the nations behind us, because that's really the program. That's the way it's meant to be.
And I want to thank you for having me on the program and affording me the opportunity to talk to people.
We are totally so happy that you're here, and we just want to thank you for being with us. And we want to remind people that they can read Yisrael Medad's blog, My Right Word, at www.myrightword.com.
Blogspot.com.
www.myrightword.blogspot.com. And also you're a frequent contributor to the Jerusalem Post. Of course, everybody knows how to get the JPost, jpost.com. People, we want to hear from you. We need you to pick up the phone and dial 1-800-940-9121 from the United States. It's a toll-free number from the United States. People in Israel, if you're going to call that number, I don't think it will be toll-free for you, but you will possibly still get through. Or you can also visit the Temple Institute's website, www.templeinstitute.org. Click on the donate button if you want to donate online, but our operators are standing by and they really, really want you to call. So please call 1-800-940-9121 and make a contribution of the size and currency of your choice to help support the work of the Temple Institute and the work of this program.
Yisrael Medad, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, both of you.
Amen. We'll be back in a few minutes after this upcoming segment, and we'll have more great programming for you. We're going to be on for many more hours. It's going to be awesome.
לזכר קודשו הודו, לזכר קודשו והודו, לזכר קודשו. למען יזמר לך כבוד, יזמר לך כבוד, ולא ידור. למען יזמר לך כבוד, יזמר לך כבוד, ולא ידור. שיבתי אליך ותרפאני, שמע השם וחנני, השם היה עוזר לי. למען יזמר לך כבוד, יזמר לך כבוד, ולא ידור. למען יזמר לך כבוד, יזמר לך כבוד, ולא ידור. אליך השם אקרא, ואל השם אתחנן, ברצונך אמרת להרי עוז, הסתרת פניך הייתי נבהל.